I'm Ariana Grande.
Hi, I'm Cynthia Erivo.
And you're listening to the Broadway Podcast Network.
Visit bpn.fm to discover more.
There's a cat over here. There's a cat over there. And the wrong one died. And the wrong one died.
Welcome to The Wrong Cat Died, the podcast breakdown of Cast Ashby. I'm your host, Mike Abrams, and today we have another amazing guest. He was Skimbleshanks in the most recent 2025 Shawnee Playhouse production that just actually wrapped up. So welcome, Michael Guerriere, and thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me, Mike.
Excited to have you. I am so bummed I didn't get to go. And I've talked to now a couple people from your production, your director, and then also your McCavity. But I'm excited to hear your story because we talked a little bit before and we exchanged some messages about your experience with cats. But before we talk about your production, I always love to hear your history with the musical. So before 2025, doing it at Skimbleshanks, when was your introduction to cats?
So I've always heard bits and pieces about the history of cats on Broadway and on the West End, but I never got the chance to see it live or see like any other production live until what we have here in Pennsylvania is called the Freddie Awards, which is basically a Tony-esque theater award ceremony for high school students within the Lehigh Valley in Pennsylvania and Warren County in New Jersey. And in 2012, one of the high schools actually did Cats, and they were up for the Freddie Award for Outstanding Overall Production of a Musical. And the schools that are up for that Freddie Award specifically get to perform one of their featured numbers on the stage at the State Theater Center for the Arts in Easton. And that school, Southern Lehigh High School, did Jellicle Songs for Jellicle Cats. And I remember being in the audience, and I was so enamored by the costumes. In fact, I had a couple friends that were at Southern Lehigh at the time performing in Cats. So it was really cool to see all the costumes, and I get to see all the movements and all the finesse that really went into the production. And aside from that, I just basically went on my own way. I never really got into Cats as my career went on. Until 2025, which is when I got into Cats at the Shawnee Playhouse. So that's basically my history involving cats.
I think it's cool to hear a high school did it, and then you're at this like award ceremony and you're getting just this one song. But before that, had you even seen like the 1998 movie or the cast album? Like, did you have any familiarity with it, or was that award show really kind of your introduction to it?
That was actually the introduction to me into Cats, because I never watched the 1998 film. I never even watched the 2019 film.
Okay.
But once I got cast as Skimbleshanks in Cats, I started to really dive deep into watching like the 1998 film, listening to the cast recordings of both Broadway and West End to try to get a feel of what the style was like and also what the movement was like.
Yeah. So you get cast now, and it's interesting. You're doing, I think, 16 shows, right? It's like a couple weeks. And so you're going through this rehearsal process with someone who did it on Broadway, who's directing it, who has this, intense familiarity with the show. How much, walk me through what you were told about Skimbleshanks and what your kind of introduction to Skimbleshanks was, because it is kind of a very unique character.
He is very lively, I will give you that. So my introduction to Skimbleshanks was that he was this extremely meticulous character. He wants everything to run smoothly by the book. He's all about cleanliness. He's all about order. He's all about high standards. And I wanted to keep that in my character interpretation of Skimbleshanks. However, as I was listening to the song, and as I was watching Jeffrey Garrett perform as Skimbleshanks in the 1998 film, I started to realize that Skimble had a little bit of a cheeky side to him. And that's the thing that I wanted to balance out along with his meticulous side. So as I was creating the character, I thought, well, usually his character is described as one of the older, mature cats within the Jellicle tribe. But since, I'm this little guy, I'm not usually the tallest when it comes to being cast into production, I thought, why not make him a younger adult? No longer a kitten, but a younger adult to where he actually is kind of like Thomas, sticking with the theme of trains here. Thomas the Tank Engine, he's all about, getting the job done. But there's this cheeky side to Thomas that, makes him relatable to a lot of kids. There's this high standards, which makes him relatable to adults. That's the kind of persona that I was going for when I was playing Skimbleshanks.
Okay. So I love kind of hearing that, because I always felt Skimbleshanks was like the uncle, like he's kind of the keeping everything in order, on time uncle that comes in. Where were there moments where you got to kind of play some of that fun? Like, were there certain sections of the show where you got to really flex that part more for you?
Definitely during the number. I obviously there's that part in the early portion of the song where Skimble lifts his leg up, in that doing that little busy in the luggage van kind of bit. And after that, the flash of the glass green eyes, where I made the flash and I scared Munkus Strap, and he falls right into Rumtum Tugger, and they, have a little scuffle there, and I kind of like laugh it off. So that's a moment where I wanted that little cheeky side to come out. Other moments during the show. Definitely during the peaks and the pollicles was when I definitely really got to let that cheeky side of Skimble out, especially when I was paired along with Finn Naughton, who was the Mungo Jerry in our production, because we got to sit around next to each other while Munkus Strap was basically narrating the song, and we got to like make fun of like dogs and stuff like that. So that was another moment during the show where I really got to get that cheeky side of Skimble out.
So you by playing Skimble younger, by like not putting him in that older bucket, did you have to adjust any of the relationships that you were thinking about? Like, because generally there are some of these, Skimble doesn't have like the very clear, like, he has to be this, he has to be that. There's a lot of like, there's some rumors. There was some Tugger stuff that happened in the 2016 Broadway revival. So there's all these like different kind of versions you can do. So it lends you a lot of opportunity. But since you aged him down, did you think about different relationships because of that?
I did. That was actually one of the talking points whenever we were backstage waiting to go on. We talked about like what relationships each of the characters have towards each other. And I was actually sitting with the castmates who were playing Exotica, Mungo Jerry, and Rumble Teaser. And my interpretation of how I played Skimbleshanks kind of lends him to be like the older brother of Mungo Jerry and Rumble Teaser.
Okay.
Kind of like, there's that cheekiness there, but he's growing. He's got that maturity that's coming in, while his younger siblings are still these troublemakers causing a lot of chaos and mischief. Okay.
So did you there's always some interesting romantic interests for Skimble that could be implied. Did you do that anywhere? Did you think about that in any of the relationships that you had?
For me personally, I didn't feel like it was necessary to give Skimble a relationship specifically to another character in the show. I think the closest I got was when I thought about, what if Skimbleshanks was the brother to Demeter? And because we kind of have a moment, because we kind of had a moment at the top of Act 2 during the moments of happiness where I would crawl over to the person who was playing Demeter and give her, that cat nuzzle, saying hello, but nothing romantic, going into that a little further. So there were relationships, but nothing romantic in my interpretation of Skimble.
Yeah. I want to ask you, because one of the coolest things that your production did that I was fascinated hearing about, and I've now heard a couple variations of it, which is really cool, is you actually had a different Grizabella go on every night. and you had some male identifying Grizabellas, you had some female identifying, I think you had some non-binary, but you had a different, like they only did one show each. And so as a performer, what was that like for you? Because I'm fascinated by the idea, because it is such a outsider coming in role as Grizabella. So I thought it was such a brilliant decision, but it also means that every night you had a different Grizabella.
It was very interesting because I never worked with a lot of the people who played Grizabella during certain performances before. So I was going into each performance blind with these people who are playing Grizabella. So it was interesting to figure out, like, what are these people's like mannerisms? Do they like to make choices? Do they like to move around a lot more? So it was interesting to develop a relationship with the different people who were playing Grizabella, because we never knew what we were going to get once each performance started. Because I think I listened to the Naomi Naughton episode where she talked about, how she didn't rehearse the Grizabella parts while the rest of us were rehearsing. So basically, I think going into each performance, in my opinion, working with a different Grizabella adds a layer of transparency and adds a layer of spontaneity. Like, you never know what you're going to get, and it adds more authenticity to your reactions, to how Grizabella moves, how she looks, how she sings. And it was so interesting, to be a part of something like that, because honestly, usually it's one person that does, Grizabella, and you have like an understudy that, fills in for her whenever, she goes on. So that was actually one of my favorite parts of the production, was getting to perform with 16 different people.
Yeah. It's such an authentic way to use Grizabella, because the entire Grizabella storyline is that she's been cast out. And for a lot of the cats, especially if you've aged down Skimbleshanks, like, you might not know her. Like, a lot of the kittens don't know her. They've heard stories. And so to have that truly, I think the word you use that as what I was thinking is authenticity. It's the most authentic reaction if you weren't used to, by the 15th show, if you had one Grizabella, kind of how she's going to do it. Assuming, again, that I know you had male identifying, which is, I also think, fascinating and really cool decision. But you kind of know what to expect. And by having someone different every night, you really don't know when they walk out what that experience is going to be and what that memory is going to be like, and what that, you have to kind of show that little hatred and then that accepting, and you get to do it differently every night. I think that's so unique and was something that I thought was cool. And as an audience member, getting to go, you could go every night and get a totally different version, essentially, which is something that doesn't exist in most other shows. And I thought was really cool, not just about your production. I think that's a Cats in general, but especially in your production. And then I think Naomi was the last one, right? Like, she was the final Grizabella, wasn't she? Or one of the second to last ones. So then you get to do and perform with your director, who's been kind of guiding you through this whole process.
Absolutely. And I was always looking forward to memory and how each of the different Grizabellas would interpret that number. And it was so interesting because I got to see, the emotional side of each and every one of these different people, once they hit that touch me at that final belting part. And it's, I gotta say, I was really, really trying to hold back emotion for each and every one of these different Grizabellas, because even though they did that part so differently, they evoked like that certain passion, that certain desire, as Naomi said in her episode, to be accepted, to let that vulnerability come out and just really let themselves be themselves.
We're going to take a quick break, and then we'll be back for more of The Wrong Cat Died.
One thing that when we were messaging before, and talking about doing this episode, that you mentioned was this whole thing about trust. And it's a show that requires such a level of trust. And I'm interested, like when you said that, I started thinking a lot about it, because you hear about it, and I've heard with a lot of people who've done it on tour, and like they build all this trust, but they also are like a family that are traveling around and in hotels and buses and everything together. You all had a very short period of time to build the trust and then to perform. So how did you feel in like this experience that related, knowing that it was, again, almost on a rush timeline to build trust so quickly with people that you had to rely on to not get kicked and not get, in the wrong space at the wrong time. And it's just such an important part.
What helped with that was I knew a lot of these people going into the rehearsal process. Like I performed with a lot of these people multiple times, and I performed with a few people in the ensemble for the first time as well. But I knew their passion for cats. I knew their passion for the arts already. I'm talking about the new people that I've performed with for the first time. So I already knew like it was going to be a well drawn out experience. I knew that all these people were going to give all their care, all their effort, and all their passion, even in rehearsals. And once it came to showtime, we really had to trust each other a lot, because during the run, we actually did not have the full cast for the entire run. I think we had the full cast twice for 2 performances, and that was during the final weekend. So we really had to stay on top of our own tracks while also looking out for each other, making sure that we're not like running over each other, that we're not, that our positions, certain choreography isn't getting muddled down or getting into someone else's space. So we really had to, like, every performance before that, we would just go over like the Jellicle Ball. We would go over certain areas where if people were going to be absent, that we had to like fix on the fly. And those were actually instances where I think more trust was built as the run went on. And then obviously as the people came back, when we had the full cast for those 2 performances during the final weekend, we really had to readjust our spacing again, because then we had the full cast together. We had even more limited space because the Shawnee Playhouse stage is not, not really that wide. It's not really that deep, especially when we had a platform that jutted out a little bit. So it was definitely rough at points, but for the most part, it was very smooth. It was organic. All these people like gelled really well together, and it made for as smooth of an experience and as smooth of a run as you could possibly have.
Yeah. What's going to be your favorite memory from doing this? Like, what are you never going to forget about this experience?
This is actually a very interesting one, because this is one that a lot of the people I talked to during the run was actually not really their favorite part. And that was actually getting to do the makeup.
Okay.
The makeup for cats. Because we actually weren't supplied diagrams as to how our specific characters were supposed to look. So what Naomi did was she had a get-together where she recorded herself, giving tutorials about how to do the basics of the makeup, having, and this is how she experienced it when she was on Broadway. Having the white, like, on the forehead that kind of jutted down in a V, and then adding other base colors, and then contouring each side of the face with different, like, stripe patterns and spot patterns. And it was very rocky for myself, especially to start with. In fact, I have a photo where I had all these like black lines that kind of like weren't really refined. They were kind of like bubbly, and I had like black lines that went down all the way across the nose. And this was during Tech Week. And after the first couple of rehearsals, I was like, okay, this isn't really getting the feel of Skimbleshanks. So I decided to not completely redo the makeup, but to take out some stuff and add new stuff in. And as the run went on, I got better and better and better at it, until I finally got a look that I felt like, okay, this is the look that I feel like Skimble should have as far as like my interpretation of the character goes. And I just stuck with it. And I actually got a lot of compliments for it. I got a compliment even from Naomi, one performance. Like, she saw my makeup and she was like, wow, Michael, that looks really good. And that made me feel good because before Cats, I have never done makeup to that scale in my entirety of my 20 years of performing.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, there's not that many shows, I think, that have that level of it, right? Unless you get into like a Lion King, Beauty and the Beast, something where you do need that. How fast could you do it by the end? Like, usually I hear people, it takes like 20, 30 minutes to do their makeup for the show, but you start getting quicker and quicker and quicker. What was your time pre-show by the end of the run?
My time by the end of the run was actually an hour and a half because I was so meticulous.
Wow.
Because I was so meticulous. See right there? Perfect for Skimbleshanks being meticulous.
Yeah.
So what I did was I actually did all my makeup via paintbrush. I never used sponges to like blend in. So what I did was I like followed like the lines on my forehead to where like a certain base color should go to until I hit the white. And then I used that to provide the outline for another base color to go on top of the first one. And then, of course, I, powdered it in to make sure it stayed. And so I bet I could do it like quicker by the end of the run. I just didn't want to get sloppy. I just wanted it to be, as good as it could be. And there was a photo I actually have as well with the final edition of the makeup that I put on for Skimbleshanks. And I did stripes. I did full stripes from basically the rear of my cheek all the way up until right about like where the cheekbone is kind of like halfway on an angle underneath my eye into my nose. And I wanted to make them long but thin because I felt like if I made them too thick, especially in a small space as the Shawnee Playhouse is, I felt like it was just going to be like too much contouring that it would just, really distract like from my eyes. So that's why I wanted to make them thin and pointy. And yeah, that's basically my gist of the story of how I did the makeup for Skimbleshanks.
I love it. Okay, let's do some rapid fire because I want to get to the last questions because I'm really curious your take as someone who, have really only, didn't see the movies for a while and kind of just had this recent experience. But first question is, if you could go on for one character one night, which cat would you want to play?
Mungo Jerry.
Mungo Jerry, love it. Who are your favorite and least favorite cats from a personality standpoint? So which one would you want to hang out with and which one would bug you?
Favorite cat to hang out with as far as personality? Honestly, I would hang out with Skimbleshanks because, you brought up earlier that he's basically the fun uncle. He would like tell these stories about his adventures being on the railway train. And that's something that I would like to, get really involved with. As far as like the least likely to hang out with, that's actually a tougher one. From my standpoint, I feel like the one that I would basically least hang out with is probably Rum Tum Tugger. And even saying that, like he would be a really cool cat to hang out with, but there's just some things about his personality, especially as someone playing Skimble, that he wouldn't personally like not care for.
Yeah.
So that would be my pick for the least likely to hang out with.
Okay. Favorite song in the show?
Favorite song is McCavity.
I agree completely. We talked a lot about trust. So who do you think is the most trustworthy cat and who's the least trustworthy cat?
Most trustworthy cat. Most trustworthy cat, in my opinion, I think is Monkeystrap.
Yeah.
Because actually, I think it would be a tie between Monkeystrap and Old Deuteronomy, because Monkeystrap is basically the protector of the Jellicle tribe, and he's the caretaker of Old Deuteronomy, while Deuteronomy is like the old, wise leader of the tribe, and he has a lot of experience, he has all this knowledge, he basically is like the conscience of the tribe. He basically knows right from wrong. As far as like the most untrustworthy cats, it's a toss-up between Mungo Jerry and Rumpelteazer due to all the mischief they do.
I was gonna say McCavity.
Oh, that's another one. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. And I think on the other side, I agree with you for Monkish Trap for sure. Old Deuteronomy I struggle with because it depends on how you interpret the show, but he also does sacrifice a cat every year. And that doesn't feel super trustworthy. So I actually think Skimble's up in pretty high in that ranks too.
I could see that, especially because, there's all he is, he, even though he is meticulous, he loves to tell stories. He loves to have this bright personality because he always does this with a big smile on his face.
Yeah. Okay. $1 million question here. I've argued at length. I don't think Grizabella is the right Jellicle choice. So I want to hear not your Skimble answer, but as you as Michael, who is your Jellicle choice and why?
My Jellicle choice, and I said this in a comment on one of your posts on the Wrong Cat Diet Instagram page, my pick would be Gus.
Okay,
because,
give me the reason.
Because, even though a lot of people say, he lived a long life, he is at peace with how he lived his life, but I listened to his song and how he mentions, like, at the end, he once played Growl Tiger, could do it again, could do it again, could do it again. That's basically like a yearning to me. Like he's yearning to relive those young memories again. So I feel like, and Gus is this gentle soul. He is this gentle soul that I feel like deserves to relive his younger days and go and live another Jellicle life.
Yeah. I agree completely. I have no arguments. That's, I think, my number one answer as well. And the number two answer in the show after all of the people that defend Grizabella. But it sounds like, you had an amazing experience doing cats. Do you want to do cats again in your future? Is this like another want to tackle show?
If there's another chance for me to do cats again, I would do it in a heartbeat because I actually have a little story to tell before we sign off.
Yeah.
So,
please.
Basically, this experience with the Shawnee Playhouse production of Cats was almost over before it even started for me. Because when Mitch McCloskey, who is the artistic director for the Shawnee Playhouse, she sent out an email offering me the role of Skimbleshanks. And as I look in my calendar about any possible conflicts that would interfere with rehearsals and with performances, I realized that I was going to be missing a lot of rehearsal time because I had plans all throughout the process, and I felt like I didn't want to be viewed as a liability as opposed to an asset to the creative process. So with that in mind, I reluctantly declined to play Skimbleshanks at the Shawnee Playhouse. And I actually had to go into work that afternoon, so I had to send that email before I went in for my shift. And all through that shift, I had that email heavy on my mind because I was wondering, like, what if? What if, I had the time and I actually got to be a part of something so legendary that all this lore is surrounding, the production itself. But then as I got near the end of my shift, I get a text, and it's from Mitch McCloskey, and she wanted me to give her a call back when I had the time, because she told Naomi that I declined the role initially, and Naomi just was practically begging for me to be in that production as Skimbleshanks, and that's why Mitch wanted me to call her in the first place. So I gave her a call, and she told me that, going back to this trust thing, she mentioned to me that, if someone else auditioned just as well as I did, but they had like no recollection of who this person is and what they can bring, as opposed to if I auditioned for Skimbleshanks and they've worked with me a lot over the years and they know what I can bring to the table, they would pick the person that they have experience with and they know they can trust all throughout the process. That just makes the decision easier for them. So that made me very humbled to know that, they trust me enough to, even though I was going to be missing a lot of time, catch right back up, stay on top of things, and just give it my all during rehearsals and performances.
Wow. What a incredible story, because it is like, you do all this work, you get the role, you're, I'm sure, thrilled about it, but then realize that you probably couldn't really do it or give it the devotion. And then, there's this again, like you said, trust and this ability to come in and know that you'll be able to still deliver. It is also, again, a little Skimbleshanks for you to kind of be coming in and out as you're needed, even in the rehearsal process. So it's like very much you getting into character.
That is. In fact, it actually helped me a lot because, in the song, at the beginning, he's sleeping on either like a bench or on, as you see in the film, he's sitting on top of a car trunk, just sleeping, dozing off. And they're asking, "Where is Skimble?" So it's definitely something that I actually did take a little bit into consideration, being away a lot for the rehearsal process, but then coming back and then really getting into the swing of things, staying focused, staying on top of things. It was definitely an aid as far as like how I developed my character. Yeah.
Wow. How this has been so fun. How can people stay in touch with you on whatever your next show is and other projects you're working on?
I have a website. It's called www.michaelguerriere.com, and I go on there periodically and announce news about when my next gig is, when my next production is. And also follow me on Instagram, and because I also post like what my next production is on there a lot. So people can follow me on Instagram. They can actually follow me as well on Snapchat. They can follow me on the website. So there's a lot of links for these people to stay on top of things with me with.
Awesome. We'll link everything too in the description notes so people have it and can find it. Thank you so much for coming on. This has been such a fun episode and getting to hear your experience. And I'm glad that Naomi and Midge basically said no to your decline, so you got to have this experience and you were able to be Skimbleshanks.
I wouldn't trade this experience for anything else. Like, it was so fun, and it was so fulfilling to be a part of something that had, like I said, so much legend, so much lore behind it, and we got to hear a lot of it. In fact, Suzanne Viverito, who was in the original production of Cats as a dance captain when Naomi was in it, she actually came to see it, and she told me after the performance that I was very specific in my character development, in my choices for Skimbleshanks. And that's actually, on my final note here, that is actually one of the best compliments that an actor can receive, because when you're telling a story, you would want your characters to have specific motives, specific goals, and you really want to know what really makes these characters tick. Like, where do they want to be in 10 years? What are their relationships like with the people around them, with the environment, with even inanimate objects? What is this character's aura? What makes this character tick? That is, to me, the most important thing when you're trying to tell a story, because to me, acting, for its ultimate definition, is basically being truthful in imaginary circumstances.
Yeah. Again, you're so spot on. What an incredible compliment too to get, and to get it from somebody so in tune to the show and as a dance captain and very knowledgeable. So what a great way to end this too on a cool story like that. So thank you again for coming on. This was so fun, and thanks everyone else for listening to this episode of The Wrong Cat Died, the podcast breakdown of the catastrophe. To follow along, you could subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or any else of us podcasts. Follow us on social media at The Wrong Cat Died, or check our website, thewrongcatdied.com.